things to talk about. Okay, so the Parsha is Vayechi, and before we start the Parsha, as we always do, I'd like to learn a couple things from the Hayom Yom. And in a way, the Hayom Yom could be seen as a warm-up, which I often say the Hayom Yom is a warm-up for, like if there's an exercise class, you do your stretches. But really, there's some very beautiful nuggets of Hasidus philosophy in the Hayom Yom. So we can call the first part of the Shir Hasidus 101. And there's some very beautiful things. So I'm going to actually read three or four of these Hayom Yoms, because I feel like they're really very instructional. And not only that, but I think that they're things that we should all know and internalize. Today's the 15th, or Wednesday was the 15th of Tavis, so we're already in the 16th of Tavis. But just going back a little bit, from an extract from the 12th of Tavis, I'll read. Even the great minds who are here, this was at a procession on Simchat Torah. Even the great minds who are here must lay aside their intellect and not be ruled by their reason and knowledge, for they are susceptible to being misguided by their intellect to the point that their end may be a bitter one. I'll explain. The essential thing in these times, in the footsteps of Moshiach, is not to follow intellect and reason, but to fulfill Torah and mitzvot wholeheartedly with simple faith in the God of Israel. I just want to say that in the yoga community, there's the concept of not being led to the delusion, confusion, and illusion of Maya. Maya is yoga terminology for the mind, for the intellect. And it's interesting that the Hayom Yom says that if a person is driven by their mind, they can come to a bitter place. And this idea of the mind being Maya, illusion, confusion, and delusion, that sometimes we think our intellect is really always the place to check everything by and to run everything through. But of course, the intellect is limited. And we as human beings, we have a developed intellect, but the intellect by definition is limited. So it's good to know the limits of the intellect. And then if a person's very intellectual, like my husband Ilya was mentioning a cute little story on Shabbat, that in South Africa, there was a big community of Litvish Jews who moved to South Africa, I guess before the Second World War. And they felt they needed to work, but they loved the Yiddishkeit very much. But they were working on Shabbos. So on Shabbos, in their work clothes, smoking their cigar, they were learning Gemara with the great geschmack. They loved learning, but they weren't keeping mitzvahs. And although that's a cute story, and I can have a lot of sympathy and even empathy to those Yidden, the idea is that it's not about the intellectual conceptions, it's actually the idea of Maisa Hu Ha'ika, that the action is the main thing. And sometimes to get to that point of action, simple faith is the way to go. You don't have to have all the complicated intellectual calculations. So that's from the 12th of Tavis. So I want to move on because there's really beautiful little nuggets here. And as I say, I feel like they deserve some attention. So the 13th of Tavis is where a lantern, good evening, Ita, nice to have you. So where a lantern is placed, those who seek light gather round, for light attracts. This is a really important idea, and I think that it helps Chabad Hasidim act in the world, because it was lessons taught from Chabad Hasidus, and I guess it's a lesson in all Hasidus, but I learned it from Chabad Hasidus, hi Ita again, that wherever there's light, it's going to dispel darkness, is one idea. So you could be in a very non-conducive to holiness atmosphere, but light, you place a lantern in the middle of the darkness. Number one, those who seek light will gather round. Light attracts. And number two, this concept, and this is what gives shluchim and people on mifsoim from Chabad the courage to go into bars and to go into non-religious neighborhoods and areas and whatever, to just dispel Torah and not to be afraid of being influenced by the environment, because not only does light attract, but it also displaces a lot of darkness. So I thought that was a really beautiful nugget. And then coming to today's, which is very profound and very apropos to the times we're living in, which I'd like to speak about, and just everything that is happening right now. So for the 15th of Tavis, which is the culmination of all the themes of the month of Tavis, it says, hearken and hear Israel. And this was written obviously a number of years ago, but it's always relevant. Torah is always relevant. Hearken and hear Israel. This is the time marked for the redemption by Moshiach. The sufferings befalling us are the birth pangs of Moshiach. Israel will be redeemed only through teshuvah. Have no faith in the false prophets who assure you of glories and salvation after the war. So this was happening during the early 1940s. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote this. Remember the word of Hashem, cursed is the man who puts his trust in man, who places his reliance for help in mortals and turns his heart from Hashem. This is a quote from Yirmiyahu. Return Israel to Hashem your God, prepare yourself and your family to go forth and receive Moshiach, whose coming is imminent. So, I thought that was pretty amazing and a great topic for discussion, which we will take in a minute. And just before I stop with the Hayom Yom, I just want to say one more little one, and then I'll stop. That Tzemach Tzedek told Reb Hindel, who was a chassid, who exemplified many of the aspects of what a chassid is supposed to be. He told Reb Hindel at Yechidus, that one-on-one meeting with the Rebbe, study of Zohar exalts the soul, the study of Medrash arouses the heart, Tehillim with tears scours the vessel. In other words, you the vessel, and your Tehillim will clean up any schmutz that is in your being. So for those people who love Tehillim, Tehillim scours the vessel. So that's for the Hayom Yom. But extrapolating on the Hayom Yom, and it's going to relate, of course, to our study of the Parsha, I just want to say a few words about Geula and Moshiach and some ideas. I somehow decided yesterday that I should start learning from the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, on Inyanei of Mashiach and Geula. So there's a beautiful book, and the book looks like this. And I went on Amazon and I try to see how much it's selling for or how one can buy it. And I'm not sure if it's in print right now, but it's really a great book. Moshe Chaim Lutzato was a Kabbalist, and this book is written, it's in Hebrew with punctuation, nukudas, but it also has English translations. I don't know, Susan, you're not talking to me, right? Right, because, okay. So just in summary, Susan, are you trying to talk to me? Just
yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
oh,
What
okay.
is the name of the book? I didn't catch that.
Secrets of the Redemption.
Gotcha. Thanks.
And if you, Ma'amar HaGeula, unveiling the process towards a perfect world. So I really have just started reading it, and I can't say that I'm really getting it. It's obviously very deep, sefer, but I wanted to just share a few ideas that are going to, obviously they're part of all of what is the basis of Chassidus, really. And they come into the Parsha, and these topics of Moshiach come into everyday life all the time. Susan, did you have another question?
I was going to send you a chat on a thought, but
yeah. So what's the other question?
the other thought, there wasn't a question. It was just a thought. I was putting it on the chat. But since you asked me, when I went to Israel for the first time, the first sefer I ever learned was Rabbi Lazuto. What's his most famous book?
Derech Hashem.
Derech Hashem, and I almost ran for the hills.
Right. Okay. So
Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
All right. So let me, just to try and summarize or share some of these amazing ideas that I got just from the beginning of the book. So it's interesting because really this should put into context all of our life struggles in general, which is that from the moment of creation, when Hashem created the world and Adam and Chava were living in Gan Eden, there was a tremendous amount of light in the world. We know this. Hashem started off with creation of Yehi Or, and there was this tremendous light in the world, and we know that the light was withdrawn. But before it was withdrawn, Adam and Chava lived in Gan Eden, present to this divine light and this divine illumination. And I've even heard explanations that Adam and Chava were not even of this world, that I've heard interpretations that Adam and Chava were even in a way like light beings, which means that they existed in a realm maybe even higher than our world. But when they sinned, so they became more dense, and their density kind of lowered them from this vibey place. And I'm using that word consciously because Susan made reference to me talking about vibes before, and I want to talk about that. They sunk because they became more dense from their sin, and in their more dense ways of being, they got skin, their beings, instead of being light beings with or, the word or is ayin vav resh, they became beings of skin, and the word for skin is aleph vav resh. Also or, but instead of the opposite. They were or aleph vav resh, light beings, and then they became skin, which is ayin vav resh, or, but really meaning leather or skin. So before their sin, they were living as these light beings, completely connected to divine source, connected to their own truth of their own nature, and connected to the truth and their connection to Hashem, very intuitive and very revealed. And so connected to Hashem, connected to their own truth, and connected to their own design. In other words, flourishing, flowing in sync with themselves. And then they sinned and they leave Gan Eden, and all the time since then, in a way, we're trying to re-experience that amount of divine light that they experienced. And we know after Adam and Chava left Gan Eden, so the light after Shabbos, it was taken away out of the world, and we make Havdalah and we try and extend that presence of light, because they had the light all through Shabbos. And then in different periods of time, this light was revealed in the world in a very expanded way. When there was Har Sinai and Hashem gave the Torah to the Yidden, there was a tremendous influx of light falling or being revealed into the world again, and there was this opportunity for redemption or living with the light again. And what happened? Right after Har Sinai, we had the Chet HaEgel, and then the light got concealed again and hidden again. And then since then, there was the light of Hanukkah, where there was, a revelation of a little bit of light. And every time there was a holiday, Purim, a little bit of light. But I think since Har Sinai, and then we had the Beis HaMikdash. I'm sorry, we had the Beis HaMikdash. We came back into Eretz Yisroel. We had the Beis HaMikdash. We had certain light in the world. And then the Beis Batei, both Beis HaMikdashes were destroyed and the light gets concealed and removed. So now we're trying to bring back that light, awake the light within us, and through awaking the light within us, we are going to try and contribute to the light in the world. L'chaim, l'chaim. So one of the things that I'm getting from this book, Secrets of Redemption, is that Moshiach does not come in an instant. First of all, it's very beautiful that he starts off his whole book and he talks about rebuilding Yerushalayim and how we're all on a journey towards Yerushalayim to rebuild Yerushalayim. But he also says that there's going to be different shepherds who are going to assist the Mashiach in bringing this light back into the world. And so what I got very strongly from reading this, and I hope to continue learning it so I can share it with you, is that Moshiach doesn't just come by himself in a flash. It's a process, and he needs us to assist him in the process. And the way we assist Moshiach in his process is that we've got to, and this is from other learnings as well, we have to coronate the Mashiach within ourselves, the aspect of Malchut, which is the aspect of leadership, which is the aspect of sovereignty that we have within ourselves. Sovereignty in that we are mastery over our own emotions. We have mastery. We are sovereign over our own midot, our own beings. We're not letting our anger or our selfishness or our jealousy or our small-mindedness or our fear or all of these constricted, dense, unevolved emotions get the better of us. We are sovereign within ourselves. We coronate the king, so to speak, within ourselves. And then we live according to our true nature in sync and alignment with Hashem, in connection and communication with Hashem. And then we become assistants. Even the Ramchal uses the word shepherds in a way. We become assistants in the shepherding of this whole process. Mashiach can't do it alone. He needs all of us to help. Ita, you want to say something? Or I just get to see you now? Oh, okay. Nice to see you. So we become assistants in the shepherding of this process. And it's all about activating that Mashiach quality within ourselves and helping. First, we connect to our truth, the truth of the reality that God is in charge of the world. And then we help others connect to that truth. And it's very interesting because the Ramchal really talks about the fact that as we get closer to Mashiach's revelation, science and technology, I don't know if he used those words, but the person who's translating and commenting on the Ramchal, his name is Rabbi Mordechai Nissim, he uses the word science and technology. But the Ramchal suggests that as we come closer and closer to Mashiach, the knowledge and the sophistication of the world makes it easier and easier to see godliness in the world. And our job in the world is to see the oneness of God in the world, communicate that, live into that, share that, and then we get to express that by returning to Yerushalayim and to Eretz Yisrael and rebuilding Yerushalayim and Eretz Yisrael. Now it's interesting because I've taught before that the word Yerushalayim is also got the idea of Yira Hashem. So Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael is Ratzon Hashem, doing the will of Hashem, and Yerushalayim has that idea of Yira, of fear of Hashem. So that's very, that's kind of like a general idea. Let me just see if there's anything else in particular that I just want to share at this time. And he talks about different, and another piece that often in my yoga classes, I ask everybody to hold their hands up and receive shefa from above. So when we in concealment and in a time of exile, the shefa, the amount of divine light coming into the world is kind of hampered. And because of our own lack of ability to receive it or to perceive it. And there was a very interesting explanation about how in the times of Galus, I've always learned that the Shekhinah is in exile. And the Shekhinah is the felt experience of Hashem in the world. The part of Hashem that can actually be felt and experienced and seen and like a visceral dwelling, Shekhinah, coming from the word shachen, which is a neighbor, or a neighborhood is a shchuna. So it's like Hashem's indwelling presence. But as the Maharal explains, the Ramchal explains so beautifully, Hashem's presence never left the world. Hashem's Shekhinah never went into exile. It's just that we can't see it. It's here, but it's our eyes that don't see that the Shekhinah is here. Of course it's here. God can't be separated from his parts. The Shekhinah is here, but it's our lack of vision and capability of seeing. So even in terms of Mitzrayim, when it says the people called out and then Hashem saw their suffering, Hashem always saw their suffering. What does it mean Hashem suddenly saw their suffering? What it means is they were so busy working that they couldn't think of Hashem as being part of their salvation. They were just like little hamsters on the wheel. Work, work, work. When they called out to Hashem, they realized they need to connect to Hashem. They saw Hashem as being able to help them, and then they called out to him. And that's what it means Hashem heard their call. But it doesn't really mean Hashem was deaf. Hashem is all powerful. What it meant is that they realized Hashem was there to listen to them, and they called out. It was their awareness that changed. So I thought that was a beautiful clarification. Let me just see if I can think of any other beautiful things just to share with you in the meantime. Yeah, I'll just read you what I just said, and then I'll move on to, maybe I'll move on. What I just said to you, I'll read it right in here. Okay, so it just says here, it says that when Hashem saw the Bnei Israel, this is referring to their awareness and perception of Hashem. For at that very moment that Hashem's existence entered their conscious awareness, they were able to call out and connect to him through the free use of their cognitive powers. This is a big thing. In this manner, it appears as if Hashem saw. In actuality, it was they who began to perceive Hashem Hashem never changes in any way or at any time. And what is Mashiach coming? It's us realizing with greater and greater clarity that there is nothing else other than Hashem. So it's our change and our needing to connect to that truth that has always been true, but it's about us raising up our awareness so that we can connect to that truth. So that's kind of maybe it for now in terms of Maharal, the Ramchal. I keep making that mistake. But I just want to say before I move into the Parsha, which is going to relate a lot to all of these ideas, I just want to talk about vibes for a minute, because Susan says I always talk about vibes. We are vibes. We are vibrations. That's really who we are. That is what light is. And we can vibe. The way that we are is really a vibration. We're part of the light. If we filled with fear and anger and negative emotions, our vibration gets slower and we become denser and heavier. If we filled with love and trust and faith, our vibration gets lighter and we vibrate or resonate on a faster pace, and our vibration gets higher. So in actuality, we're trying to raise our vibration. So if you think about it, Adam and Chava were light beings. They were functioning on a very high vibration. When you're angry and you're doing averas and you're not doing mitzvahs and you're full of fear, anger, negativity, you get much more low vibration, much more dense, and you don't emit light. So the idea of vibing and vibrations, it's a very central idea of us trying to connect to Hashem's light, manifest his light, reflect his light, because we are part of his light. And light, after all, is an energetic vibration, really. It's I don't know, sound is a vibration, light is an emanation. I don't know if it's is light a vibration? I guess someone who knows physics can tell me, but sound is certainly a vibration, but light is I think it's emanating out. So vibes are a big part of what I teach, because it's a big part of how I understand the world to be and spirituality and such. So I hope that answers that question in sufficient terms. Okay. So now we're coming into the Parsha, which is called Vayechi. And Vayechi is, and he lived. But interestingly enough, it's the Parsha about Yaakov dying. And it's very similar to the Parsha of Chaya Sarah, which is the Parsha once Sarah has died, and Abraham is looking for a burial place for Sarah. So it's called Chaya Sarah, the life of Sarah, but she's just died, and Abraham is buying a burial place for her. So that's, and then we talk about how it was very important for Abraham to secure this burial place, and then there's a shidduch story between Yitzchak meeting Rivka, and Sarah lives on through the life now of her son Yitzchak and his new wife Rivka, and they create a home, and all the blessings that were associated with Sarah in her tent reappear in the tent of Rivka, so she lives on. So her life is continuing on in the life of her daughter-in-law and her son. And now we have the same idea with Yaakov. Yaakov is dying, he knows he's dying, and he calls his sons around him, and the question is, what is life? So when are you truly alive? So from a Torah point of view, you are truly alive in some sense when what you stood for and what you stand for can live on after you are no longer present in the world. So whether it's your actions, or whether it's your teachings, or whether it's your creations, your artistic contributions, your, you know, you something about what it is that you do in the world, living on beyond your life, and that's how your life has eternal meaning. So for Yaakov, he had these 12 sons, and for him especially, the fact that at his bedside, as he's dying, he has all of his 12 sons that are close to him and following in his path is a huge thing. So I'm just thinking which chumash I should use, because I think I'm going to use the one which I studied from. It's always the best. So okay. So it starts off and it says Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, and the days of Yaakov, the years of his life, were 147 years. And the time approached for Yisroel, now his name's gone to Yisroel, to die. So he called for his son, for Joseph, and said to him, please, if I have found favor in your eyes, please place your hand under my thigh and do kindness and truth with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt. And I will lay down with my fathers, and you shall transport me out of Egypt and bury me in their grave. And Joseph says, I'll do it. I will do in accordance with your words. And Yaakov says, swear to me. And he swore to him, and Yisroel prostrated himself towards the head of the bed. Okay, so there's a couple things here I want to speak about. First of all, Yaakov thinks of, it says that Yaakov felt that the 17 years that he lived in Egypt were his best years. How is it these 17 years were his best years? So that's kind of an interesting question. Like, he's living in Egypt. He used to live in Eretz Yisroel. Now he's living in this place that's really like I don't know if I should say Las Vegas, because there's even a nice Torah community now in Las Vegas. But if we could think of a place that represents like the schmutz of the world, I don't know which is a good place to say or to mention or to highlight, but it was the schmutz place of the world. It was a very evolved society, but it wasn't a very moral society. So Yaakov is living there for 17 years, and somehow these are the best years of his life. What about the years he lived in Eretz Yisrael? Okay, so we know when he lived in Eretz Yisrael, he was mourning for his son. And now when he comes to Egypt, he also sees Joseph in his glory, fulfilling his mission, feeding and sustaining the world. And not only that, but he sees that Joseph is frum in a very non-frum environment. And here comes a very interesting topic that is worth talking about, because there's the difference between Yehuda and Yosef, and also a difference between Yaakov and Yosef. Yosef is the Yid who can survive in Galus, and not only survive in Galus, but even thrive in Galus. Yosef is frum, but he's mixing in all the high society. He's the second most important person in all of Egypt, and yet we know that he's 100% frum and 100% Yirat Shemayim, and everything he does with Hashem in his consciousness. And it's interesting because the Meforshim say that when Yaakov asks Yosef to please promise to take him out of Egypt and bury him in Marat HaMachpelah, he's a little nervous that Yosef will keep him in Egypt to give chizuk to the Yidden in Egypt, and chizuk in Egypt, as in Galus. And Yaakov says, this is not my shita, it's not my way. I don't want to be in Mitzrayim. My place is to be in Eretz Yisrael, so that when the Yidden need koach and inspiration and help, I can help them from outside. But Yosef, on the other hand, when he passes away, his bones stay in Mitzrayim with the Yidden, and when they come out of Mitzrayim, they take Yosef's bones. I don't know if you know the story, the bones are actually in the Nile, and they throw in a parchment with Hashem's name in it, Alei Shor, and the bones come up, and then they take the bones with them when they go out of Egypt, all of the Yidden, but he stays with them in Egypt. And these are two different shittas. The same shitta of Yaakov, which is to be outside of Eretz Yisrael, is also the shitta of Yehuda, which is that Yehuda has his community and his family and his children in Goshen, and they kind of have a yeshiva community and an insulated community, and they manage to exist in Galut, but they don't feel that their main purpose in life is to transform the Galut. They're surviving the Galut, but they're not trying to transform the Galut. When we look at Yosef and we look at his naming of his children, we're going to see this dynamic as well. But before I go on to Yosef's children, I just want to make sure that I've told you all the things that I want to tell you about this. So this idea that, first of all, how could Yaakov be so happy? How could Yaakov be so happy in Egypt when Egypt is the schmutzig place? And it says that the Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, when he was a little boy, he asked his grandfather, Shneur Zalman of Liadi, how could it be? And then Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi explains to his grandson that they were able to learn Torah and live in a Torah lifestyle, even in the challenges of Galut. And actually, we have our deepest satisfaction when we face challenges and we overcome those challenges. And even though they were in this foreign country, not a ruchniistic country, that aspect of constantly overcoming a challenge is in a way what gives very deep satisfaction. So I just want to say welcome to Sari. I see that you've arrived, so welcome to you. So this is this aspect of, you know, learning and overcoming and struggling against something and being victorious. It's like how Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was explaining to us in the previous parshas, when we overcome struggle, how there can be so much gain from that. But Yosef's story is different. He's in a way managing to really infiltrate into society, and there's a different aspect to thriving despite the society and being in an environment, and the environment is actually where you're shining because you're transforming the environment. You're not just surviving it, you're transforming it. And that idea comes actually in the naming of Yosef's two sons. Because as Yaakov is passing away, he says to Yosef, please bring me your sons. And Yosef brings him Manasseh and Ephraim. And these two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, also symbolize two opposing energies. The energy of Menashe is that even though I'm away from my father's house, I've actually, I think, let me just find it inside, that there's two different attitudes here with the naming of the two different sons and what the two different sons represent. Let me just find it inside. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So Menashe is, I think that the name Menashe, I think, I've forgotten right now, but it's that something about the house of my father. I can't remember, it just slipped my mind, but it's not such, I'm managing even though I'm away from my family. But the name Ephraim refers to I'm fruitful, I've turned it around, this difficult situation. So when Yaakov is blessing, we know that he blesses Ephraim with the right hand and Menashe with the left hand, even though Menashe is the older. So the commentary is Menashe represents our obligation to protect ourselves from the negative influences of our surroundings and our own lower nature. But Ephraim, in contrast, represents our obligation to influence our surroundings, to be fruitful, to be productive, to transform the place we are, to introduce the truths of Judaism to the world, to transform what is dark and evil into something godly and good. Menashe corresponds to the call of Surmei Ra, like get away from bad, but Ephraim is Va'asei Tov, and do good. And in a way, that's like a Yosef persona as opposed to a Yehuda persona, or even the way Yaakov himself lives in Egypt and wants to be taken and buried in Marat HaMachpelah. But Yosef is this incredible energy of transforming the Galut, spreading, sharing, being in the midst of that and yet turning it around. So I think maybe that's even, I have more things to say, possibly, but for the meantime, I think I'm going to pause the recording. Let me just share this with you. So he's talking about eternity, and in terms of looking at Yaakov's life and eternity, and he's saying, what does the Zohar say? And then it's the body may rot away, but one's identity is defined by one's inner essence and the manner in which one is living. So the Zohar claims that man is not a hybrid of soul and body, but rather an amalgamation of soul and life. The body may disappear, but our life stories, in the sense that of the things we've done and our deeds and our actions and every mitzvah we've done, that's going to endure forever. And then it says also there's the synthesis of being and doing. So being is represented by the soul and the soul's inner essence, but doing is one's life story. What we do in the world is really what lives on. For Yaakov is those sons and their legacy, and that they held to his life's path, and they held to his vision, and they held to what he stood for. That's his life, and that's what lives on. I just want to, I spoke last week about, and I have been speaking all the time about the times that we're in, and now we're ending 2020 and moving into 2021 and all this kind of insecurity with the election and all this time. But we are in this incredible time where, in terms of what I've been speaking about before, connecting to one's light and one's authentic nature, and in order to while we're doing that and we're connecting to our light and we're connecting to our authentic nature, that this is part of revealing Moshiach in the world. And while all around us there's so much confusion and there's so much opposition and there's so much machloket and fighting and people on this side of the equation and people on that side of the equation, and what's our task is to kind of align with our own truth, to align with the light within, to align with Hashem, the light without, and to kind of like stand in that truth and like the Hayom Yom, be that lantern radiating some kind of consciousness of emes in a world that's very, where emes and truth are very concealed and very challenged left, right, and center, to start knowing what your truth is. I'm sitting in this space. I am, I'm hearing the people around me. I'm loving the people around me. I'm being kind. I'm being generous. I'm in my own place. I'm in my own truth. And I heard one of the rabbis that I listened to, he concluded his shiur and he said, in this time, which is so close to the time of the revelation of Moshiach, he says, everybody has to do their bit. And like I said, from the Ramchal, he says, Moshiach needs all these helpers. And so this rabbi, I think his name is Rabbi Weissmandel, I'm not quite sure, I haven't been listening to him that long. But he said, everybody has to do their bit. Everybody has to try and be as loving and kind and generous as they can, helping other people as they can. And I'll say, and further, standing in your truth, whatever it is. I'm hungry and I don't want to eat now. Be honest to that. I'm tired and I can't go out now. Be honest to that. I would love to help you right now, but it's too much for me. Be honest to that. Start listening to the truth of your own reality and getting honest and grounded in your truth so that you can manifest and shine your light. Don't believe what everybody's telling you how you feel. Like as a child, when your mother is cold, she tells you to wear a sweater. Do I feel cold? Do I need a sweater? Yes, I do. Okay, I'm putting it on. Start to get connected to your truth physically, emotionally, psychologically, and we can be those shepherds that stand in truth, manifest truth, share truth, and help to bring in a period of greater truth. So